Yes, ma'am.
It is January 12th, 2021, and you are listening to episode 27 of the Candid Clarinetist podcast. What's going on, everybody? Sam Rothstein here, acting principal clarinet with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra and host of the Candid Clarinetist podcast. I hope everyone is having a great start to the new year. We all made it. We did it. I knew at some point we probably didn't think it was possible, but here we are, 2021. I did a little Candid Clarinetist year in review episode last week where I looked back at the first 6 months of the Candid Clarinetist podcast and also gave a little preview of what's to come. If you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend doing so. You can find us on almost all podcasting platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Pretty much anywhere you can get your podcasts, we will also be there. Make sure to subscribe so you can have access to the new episodes as soon as they are available for download. A few days ago, I posted the first video on our new and improved YouTube channel comparing the Buffet Tosca bass clarinet to the Buffet Prestige bass clarinet. I would love it if you all went over there to the YouTube channel and subscribed. I'm really looking forward to putting out some more content on YouTube, and I have a lot of great ideas planned. So head on over there and help us spread the word by sharing our content on Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff. So our guest for today, about 10 years ago or so, Richie Hawley, who is currently a professor of clarinet at Rice University, posted a blog entry on his website about orchestral etiquette. I found it to be incredibly compelling and frequently revisit it every couple of years and read through it all just to make sure that I'm staying in line and behaving in orchestra. But I'm pleased that we have the author of the post here as our guest today. Richie, it's so generous of you to spend your time with me this afternoon.
Hey, Sam, I'm stoked to be here, and everyone should definitely check out your YouTube comparison of the Tosca and the Prestige bass, because there's nothing like that out there, and it's a big question when people go to buy a bass clarinet. You know, what do you do? What's the pluses and minuses? I know I went through that, so that was great. Very, very good YouTube.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And actually, before we get started, you were actually a big inspiration for me sort of get this. I mean, of course, the content creation thing has been happening now because of, we're all trying to find different things to do. But you did this before anyone else was doing it. And I remember your video, it was a vlog. You went to Paris for the buffet celebration. And then, you brought back the tradition clarinet and you did like a sort of a side-by-side comparison. And I was like, you know what? I really, really love that video. I mean, I must have watched that video like 20 times because
it's one of those things that people are like, what is this new clarinet? Why should I go out and spend money on something that's, what do I need it? Do I not need it? So yeah, you really addressed it well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
And I loved like the production value of your video and everything. And I feel like there's sort of a hole where that needs to be filled. And I hope that, if anybody has any requests or anything, please let me know. I'm just looking for to sort of help people out because it's hard to have access to all of that without getting it shipped to you or buying it or whatever. So I'm hoping to use that channel to do that. About the blog post, the Orchestral Etiquette blog post, what was sort of the impetus for you creating this post? Because I remember, was this actually before we get there, was this before you started teaching full time? Was this when you were still in the orchestra?
Well, when I was in the orchestra in Cincinnati, I was doing the insane thing of playing principal in a major orchestra and being full-time teaching. Yeah. And so I had a full studio of my own students. I had 12 students at CCM, but I was running a studio of 23 students. And I think that it was obvious to me that there was a bit of education that wasn't happening for my students. And I would go to rehearsals sometimes and watch their behavior in rehearsals. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my student is such a jackass. Why is he or she doing that? And then I realized that I'd made all these same mistakes. Every single list on everything on my list on my website, and there's probably more that I didn't put down. But I've made the mistake of everything on this list. So it was easy to come up with the first half of the list, and then I sent out a questionnaire. I gave people a piece of paper in a rehearsal, and I said, when you're bored in rehearsal today, write down something that drives you bonkers that people do that they shouldn't do, that they need to be told, yes or no. So that was filled in the rest of the blanks, and thus this list that has made its way through many clarinet studios and various discussions and blog posts. So,
well, it's terrific. I mean, and they can find it at richiehawley.com on your blog tab, and it's the very bottom one. So I think it was your first ever blog post, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Yeah,
it's one of those things. It's timeless.
Yes.
I think that you could say, right, the orchestra world is changing, everything is changing, but there's certain rules of behavior that are timeless no matter what.
Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because I mentioned that I always sort of refer to it and go back to it. And there's certain things where it's like, I don't recommend people doing this, but there's certain things on there where, like, if I'm mad at someone, I'll do it just because, like, just to, like, emphasize, because I know I'm not supposed to be doing it. But don't be me. Don't behave like that to your colleagues. So going through it, what are the things that are most important to you? I mean, the first one that comes up, do not turn around and look at people behind you while they are playing. This is a huge thing. There's nothing more unsettling. You're playing the cadenza of the Kodai, and all of a sudden, the seventh chair viola turns around, whips their head around, and stares right at you.
Always. And it's always the violist.
Yeah.
Always. It's funny you bring that up. I had a very unhappy relationship with the viola section in Cincinnati Symphony. I mean, I can tell you more about that later, but I would know how long to hold those pauses in the Scheherazade cadenza, where you go, ba, ba, bee, da, 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 and then you wait, right? Because the strings go, ba, ba, ba. I would know for the last one when I'd waited long enough was when one of the violists in the back of the section turned around and looked at me like I had died or something. But that was the indication. Time to play.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But for you, like, let's do like 3 points that are like really important to you.
Well, I think the very first one is the most difficult. And I learned this in my first job in Charleston Symphony. And I had some very kind colleagues that were very honest and helpful, and were mentoring me and helping me to understand that this was a different world than the world that I was in as a student, even though I was at the Curtis Institute of Music, where everything had to be perfect and you had a lot of, built-in behavior modification with just tradition. But the number one thing is that we all, no matter what level of player we all make mistakes, right? And my mistakes, sometimes I'll have a catastrophic mistake, forget a repeat, play a wrong note. But usually the mistakes that I make are little tiny subtle things, and they're things that I'm not satisfied with. Start of a note, intonation, those sort of things, rushing in a passage or being not even. So all these things. So that's at the advanced level, right? That's when you've got it full successful career. You still feel just as bad with those tiny mistakes as when you're starting the career, and you miss an entrance, or you squeak, or you stumbled on a passage. It feels just as bad. And when you start off in a professional orchestra and those more major things happen, which they can happen, there's this instant reaction that we have saying, to everyone around you, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bongle that passage that we were playing together." And one of my colleagues in Charleston Symphony said, I didn't even notice it. And this person was being very nice. She was being very, very nice. There's no way she could not have noticed it. But she said, don't don't apologize for it, because you're just drawing attention to it and you're showing how insecure you are. And that makes us think, wow, did we not choose the right person? And I've had this talk with several new young players when they came to the Cincinnati Symphony, because they would be playing and, they would have some of these mistakes. It happens. And especially in the first couple months, and they'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And like, don't apologize. You're always going to feel like you could do something better. And it's very true. Even to the week that I left the orchestra, there was some little articulation things I wish I could have done better. But had I been apologizing to everybody around me, it would have just drawn attention to that which wasn't as perfect as I thought.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting perspective, and I think, well, I know I'm very thankful. One of my colleagues here, who is a former colleague of yours, actually in Charleston, Roger Rowe, fantastic English horn player. He kind of guided me, and I think we all have a Roger Rowe in our lives, where there's just people who just kind of guide you, and they're like, hey, when you said that to the conductor, like maybe try to say it this way, or hey, maybe you don't need to, like you said, you don't need to like apologize for this or whatever. And so we, as we go along, we're learning these things along the way. And, you're in a unique position now that you're teaching and nurturing young students. And I wonder how much of this gets sort of integrated into your curriculum, because I think I was talking to, I can't remember if it was Jackie Glazier or somebody else, but there's just not enough. I mean, you're trying to teach your students how to play clarinet first and foremost, right? Or how to be a better musician.
Yes.
There's just not enough time to like teach everybody everything they need to know.
True.
In the profession. So like how much of this gets integrated into it? Is it kind of just like when they make the mistake, then you do it? Or do you?
I think a lot of it is, when Jackie was in school with us at CCM, it would be the faculty, we weren't as involved with their daily life, right? However, even though that wasn't that long ago, there was a lot more connection from Jackie's generation of student with the history of clarinet and the history of orchestra playing. And it's disappearing very, very fast. And I guarantee the reason for that is because your generation, Sam, you had to grow up and listen to track down recordings that you wanted. Yeah. It wasn't instantly there, right? Mm-hmm. On YouTube. So the act of tracking down whatever recording you're looking for, whether it be at a library or a CD or a download you could get and pay for, you had to really research which orchestra you liked, which clarinet player you liked, who is this person, who is the conductor, what is the time frame, and you became a lot more aware, like Jackie or Todd Cope, who was in school at the same time, a lot more aware of these orchestra traditions. So there was this sort of reverence for sitting in the orchestra, and when everything is so instant with, all right, I can instantly pull up in 5 minutes 12 Beethoven 6 first movements and narrow down 4 of them to just the bars of the clarinet solo. You don't get whole tradition of that orchestra. You haven't had to scour through the recording. You haven't had to listen to the orchestra. And this is a fact. It's just a generational thing, but a lot of it's getting lost in the translation, so that when people do go and sit in the seat, they don't have quite the reverence for the hallowed ground and the traditions of music making that they need to be very aware of. And you hear this, when people play auditions and this whole, people sound great. There's all these people qualified that make it to the finals. Well, what makes someone sound really special in that final round is someone seasoned. And the word seasoned means not necessarily that they've played in an orchestra previously, but they're very aware of the context of the music and the repertoire and the traditions that go by certain stylistic things with the clarinet repertoire. So, sorry, such a long answer on that, but I think it's just the respect for sitting in an orchestra has diminished.
Wow, that's a really profound comment, and I think that even thinking back to when I was in school, I was it was a big thing to like have access to the part, like the music.
Right.
We used to have to go to the orchestra library and check out the music,
That's
or
right.
like, one person in the studio had like this. Remember the CDs, the orchestra library CDs
Sure.
that you
Yeah.
could get the PDFs off of, and like we had to go find our parts, and now you can like get everything so instantaneously. That you're right. That there's this thing where it's like, okay, you have your Instagram and you can put up orchestral excerpts, but there's not this thing about like, wow, this is what these people did ahead of me. So that's a really that's a really interesting comment about how it's changed so much over the years, and the
And
reverence.
so
I think,
rapidly.
yeah,
So rapidly. And think about when you were Northwestern. How often did you go to Chicago Symphony?
not as often as I should have.
Right. But when you would go there, that was an event,
Yes.
and that doesn't happen as much now.
Right, because you can just get it from your home.
Right. And there's something very different, and it's not just about the pandemic, but there's something very different from watching a Berlin Philharmonic live stream, which is, you're paying for it, as opposed to going to Chicago Symphony and sitting in the nosebleed seats, because that's where the student pricings are, right? And waiting, and you see whomever, it doesn't matter what instrument you are there for, there's a person that you're watching everything they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you have great respect, and you grow a great new appreciation for the pressures that person must be feeling, and what you wonder, what's going through their head, what's happening, what are they doing with their reeds, what all is going on, and you get a lot more intrigued. And then when you are in that position, even as a student, you realize, wow, this individual really made it look easy, but it can't be. So
Right.
there's a lot more sort of awareness as a result of going to concerts, which I think is also diminishing.
Yeah, and that's wow, it's just a really interesting comment, because like you go to like you said, like when I used to go to Chicago Symphony, I used to like watch everything that Laurie Bloom would do, just because he was my teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and just how he would play things and how he would like interact with his colleagues. And I always, this is kind of getting off topic, but like whenever I see a really amazing concert, it causes me to think not about music but about other things. And so oftentimes when I was riding home from these concerts, my mind would be just like thinking about things.
Right. Yeah,
But
of course.
but like that's like the transformative experience of music in a way. But also I think that now that I do that every weekend, and I'm in those seats, I know the amount that it takes to do that
Mm-hmm.
on a weekly and daily basis. And what I experienced in the audience was different to what you experience on stage.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when you're in the audience as a student, that makes you hungry in a whole new manner, and you appreciate those surroundings in a very, very real way.
Yeah, and you also remember like how, like I'm sure you could, come up with a Philadelphia Orchestra concert that you heard when you were in school that just changed
Right.
your life, and
Yes,
you'll
of course.
never forget that particular concert.
That's right.
And so having that in the back of your mind when you're creating that on stage, you never know if you're affecting Richie Hawley, the 18-year-old Curtis student, and changing
That's
their
right,
life
yeah.
in a profound way. And so
That's right.
I agree. I think that's important for students to know, that like going and attending concerts, orchestra concerts, is an incredibly important part. I don't, the Berlin Phil is great and the digital concert hall is great, but you need to go and sit and see the Houston Symphony. It's just
Right.
it's a totally different thing.
That's right.
Anyways, so we got a little off topic, but that's
No, that's right on topic, because this makes that reverence for that chair. Whether
yes.
the reverence for sitting in that clarinet section, that is an elite spot to be in. And so you get into that position, and you have to mind your P's and Q's and behave and get tenure and be a good colleague. And that's why the number one thing I said is that you get into this position and you're so worried about making all these mistakes on this list
Right.
that you're starting to apologize for things that you shouldn't be apologizing for. So that's why my number one thing is don't apologize unless you drop your mouthpiece cap in a noisy section and it's a metal one like I used to have somewhere around here, or you punch your stand into the back of the flute player, things like that. Physical calamities you should apologize for. Musical, you shouldn't apologize for. Just get them better and don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, I think that's really the best advice, because like we're all gonna make probably every mistake on this list.
Oh yeah.
Oh, like this is a good one. Swab out discreetly and not if the person next to you is playing a solo. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I've had people do that to me. They just whip their swab. You know, it's like.
Yep. Well, I got talked to by Bill Winstead, who's the principal bassoon player of Cincinnati. There was one, some rehearsal early on. He really put me in my place in understanding these things. I really wasn't even paying any attention to the fact he was in the middle of some gigantic solo in Shostakovich 9. I was just worried about, making sure that my clarinet was dry for the next one. And so, yeah, whipping that right next to someone's peripheral vision is a very, very annoying thing.
Yeah. And there's another one on here too. Do not yawn or buzz your lips audibly if you are tired. This one I learned actually in school, fortunately enough. I got yelled at by Steve Cohen because I yawned really loudly in one of his excerpt classes, and he called me out in front of everybody, deservedly so. And so that's a good one too. And I mean, everything on this list is really important. I think for me, one of the biggest things for me is number 2, the perfume and cologne to a minimum.
Right?
Yeah. I one of my first jobs was I played with a touring Broadway show. That was one of my first jobs, and there was somebody in the band, and we were in these tiny pits and all these Broadway houses all over the country. One of my colleagues, he would wear cologne like really, and right behind, sit right behind us, and it was just like, and people would try to talk to him about it, and he would be like, yeah, and then he'd do it again like 2 weeks later, and so it's really distracting, especially, I mean, we play wind instruments, we have to breathe, and
it's horrible.
If you're smelling, Chanel, whatever, it's hard to kind of focus. It's just a distraction. It's another form of distraction.
I think you just hit on the list should not be called orchestral etiquette as much as orchestral distractions to all of your colleagues and how to not get tenure.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a big issue that's not on here. I kind of put a little bit, I made one note on it, but phones in rehearsals now are everywhere, obviously, and we keep them on our stands. I'm guilty of that. But I have to say that there have been times in my career in the last 5 years when I was playing a lot in St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, or I did a stint in Auckland Philharmonic in New Zealand. Other than one day where I was having to watch a storm unfold here in Houston and make sure that my house did not flood, I really made a special effort to keep my phone completely away, and for a tuner, using a manual tuner if I needed it, but just not being distracted, because guaranteed there would be a message or something on the phone, whether it be urgent or not. My time on the stage has to be for making music and rehearsing the music, and not attending to the rest of what's happening in my life.
Yeah, that's one that, I mean, you're hitting all the ones that bother me the most. But phones especially, not so much for myself, but do it for. It's kind of like wearing a mask, right? You don't wear a mask to protect yourself. You wear a mask to protect those around you. And it's the same thing with phones. Like if you see someone's cell phone blowing up next to you and you're trying to like concentrate, it's really distracting.
Right?
And,
yeah, even if it just lights up.
Yeah, lights up or dings or buzzes or anything. I mean, but just this, just the lighting up. all of a sudden you get this extra stimulus that you're probably already getting enough stimulus from the conductor that you don't need another thing getting to you. And another one I wanted to highlight too on this list, and I love this one, which is do not tell someone he or she sounds good if he or she does not deserve the praise, which goes along with the previous one. One of my former colleagues in the orchestra used to, as a joke, he used to come back in the locker room and he would say, "Sam, I thought you sounded great tonight. How did I sound?" Because,
Whoa.
just like, it was totally a joke, but, you don't if you're tapping your foot and applauding every single little thing that everybody does, you're devaluing a positive reinforcement, right? Because all of a sudden then it's not a positive reinforcement. It's actually a negative reinforcement, because if you don't do it, they're like, whoa, did I do something wrong?
That's right. Yeah, it just builds up a whole. Those are things that people really need to think about right when they start a job. Most of these things are critical for a newbie or a rookie in an orchestra, because you want to tap on your thigh when someone does great, but maybe wait till the concert. Don't do it at the rehearsal. Or if it's at the rehearsal, afterwards say, "Hey, that was awesome," and leave it at that. There's as you said, Sam, you don't want to build up this expectation that every time something happens, whether it be medium or great or not so great, that the person gets a comment, because then you become that person that comments on everything.
Yeah, and I think that, some of the best compliments I've ever gotten from my colleagues are actually after all the concerts are over, and they'll just like pull me aside, like after everything's done, "Hey, you just sounded so great all week. Like, it's really a privilege." Something like that is way more meaningful than first time you run through a solo, everyone's shuffling their feet for you. At least for me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Yeah. Preach, brother.
Yeah, that's right. So you mentioned the cell phone thing, but is there anything else that you would sort of add to this list as, maybe let's actually go to, in terms of professional etiquette, I went through some of this stuff when I spoke with Jackie, but like things that students do, maybe if they're looking to come study at Rice with you, like what would be some things in terms of communication or whatnot that you would want to avoid,
There's a couple really specific and very different things. One is simple. I talk to my students and I say, "Hey, I think you need to change your articulation here and there." And they don't, it's not that they don't write it down. They didn't even have a pencil out, So it seems sort of it's disrespectful when someone says, "I need you to change this," and someone doesn't actually make that change in the music. It turns into a real disrespect. It's, maybe all my students now that don't have pencils and don't write things down, they've got a photographic memory. So great. What are they doing playing music? They should go into like card counting,
right?
Go to casinos.
You can make a lot more money doing that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that's one that just drives me nuts, and it's a major problem. Major problem still. And the other interesting thing, which is, I don't think it's even on this list, but this need to be drinking water all the time in a rehearsal. So imagine a conductor's up there conducting, and every single person, every 6 or 8 minutes, 10 minutes, takes a sip out of their sippy cup bottle, right? I mean, I understand we need to stay hydrated, but for a conductor, that means every 30 seconds, there's a bottle going up and down and up and down, and the sound of it. And it's just, playing in an orchestra, it's an hour and a half stretch till the first rehearsal break, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty uniform everywhere. Have a sip of water beforehand, or big drink of water, and then have a drink of water at the break. Having the bottle up there, unless you have a medical reason for it, is really not necessary. And frankly, students have the bottles with them all the time. Most halls will not let you bring any sort of bottle on the stage, whether it be closed or open. I mean, just no. That's just the stagehands will say, "No, you get that bottle off the stage."
Yeah, it's interesting. Plus, go ahead. Sorry.
It becomes a very big liability for punting.
Yes.
you know?
Right. Yeah. I can't tell you how many coffee cups have been dumped over on the stage. And, after people have said, do not bring anything on the stage. But we actually had a big thing in our orchestra a couple of years ago about the water bottle thing, because our conductor wasn't happy that people were bringing these big cups up, because he wanted everything to be black on the stage. So they actually provided us with these cups. Now, the problem with these cups is that you had to pick them up and drink them. And so we had this whole thing. It's like, if you want to bring water, that's fine, but it's really distracting if you lift these cups up and tilt your head back, especially like, in the middle of a concert or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think if you are some people need water, like they have a medical condition or whatever, they need water.
Right.
And I'm
Yep.
totally, and sometimes my mouth gets really dry, whether it's the weather or whatever. And so I understand the need to drink water. But I highly recommend, if you do need that, to get a bottle that has a straw that doesn't make any noise.
That's it.
And so you can discreetly, go down and drink it when you need to. Otherwise, it is another thing that's an incredible distraction to not only your colleagues, but also to the audience and to the conductor. And it's just like you said, it's a respect thing. And I think that that's really important. And then your other point, writing things down. I have a student right now, and she's fantastic. She's an adult student. I had never taught an adult student before. And she literally, like, every single thing that I tell her, she writes down. And which is interesting, because, like, when I was a student, I mean, to your point, I remember I used to ask Lori, he would say, hey, look for this, you want to listen to this recording. And I would say, is it okay if I write it down? And he'd look at me like I was a crazy person. And it's like, of course it's okay if you write it down. Like, yes, that's why I'm telling you that, because I want you to remember it, And so I think that's a thing too. And not only just in lessons, but like, if you're in orchestra and the conductor says, hey, I want you to do this here, and none of your section mates pick up your pencils and write things down, that's not a good thing. You want to hear the best sound of a conductor is the sound of a pencil hitting a stand, especially in education, because then they know that you're actually listening and taking the coaching. Even if you write, this guy's a jerk, and put it down, it's something that gives them confirmation that you're listening to them. And I think, as a teacher, you experience that, where you'll be telling someone something for 45 minutes and they don't write anything down. And then the next lesson they come back and it's the same issue. And you're like, well, why didn't you write it down?
It's just being professional.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, where are we at? So you have... at Rice, what's your studio class sort of arrangement? Do you guys do like specific topics, or do you do just people play for each other, or are there different kinds of sets with it?
It's I go with whatever the studio vibe is for the month. If we have a whole bunch of auditions coming up, then we work on that, and we work on. I hate the whole format of a studio class of, all right, let's pick somebody to play, and then everyone comments. And I have to admit, sometimes we end up doing that, but my preference is always, all right, who's got something coming up? We're circling the wagons, and this is going to be this group of people is going to help you get there, whether it be a recital or an audition or a summer audition or a college audition or a big part. Let's say we're doing Miraculous Mandarin, having the whole studio observing those three people working out those intricate clarinet parts and making suggestions. So I think because we have such a small program here at Rice, we can really focus on what the immediate studio needs are. And in regards, back to what I was saying, when I was teaching, and like Jackie and Todd are in school, I wasn't sitting in orchestra like I do now. And so now I can sit there, and when my students don't have a pencil, I can really fuss at them. Or if they're drinking tons of water, I could say, would you like a snack with that too? And I can just be really sarcastic and obnoxious. And, when they're tapping their foot, I can crawl through the floor and hold it down and just be like the little devil, showing them their ways and how to respect their colleagues just by being that voice of observation from the second bass clarinet chair, usually where I'm sitting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, do you ever do any like really focused classes on like orchestral etiquette? Like, do you sit down and go through this, or are you just like, here's a reference in case you want to look at it? Because I think
We sometimes do it. I'm the chairman for wind chamber music, so every couple of years we do this in wind chamber. We have a little seminar, and it's great because my colleagues, everybody that teaches here is principal clarinet in a major orchestra, and so they all have their. I go down this list, and each one of them has their experience on how they were humbled by learning one of these things on the list. Every single one of these amazing principal players.
Yeah, I believe that.
Everyone has to make these mistakes.
Yeah, that would be really valuable in my opinion. Actually, one of the master classes that I remember most vividly from my time in school was Leslie Grimm gave a master class on how to write a resume. And it was just like, I didn't know that you shouldn't put this on it. And I didn't know that, so it's stuff like that I feel like, it's good to get away sometimes. And perhaps you would agree or disagree, but I think it's good to get away from the just like you said, somebody plays and everyone makes comments, because that's what we do all the time. And that's what you do in your lessons and that's what you do by yourself. But these really like important professional development and life things that you're going to actually encounter when you start working as a musician are really important, and it's better to learn them before you make the mistake yourself.
That's exactly you hit the nail on the head. And in a certain amount of these, you're going to learn for yourself. And that's just the story of life. If that weren't the case, there wouldn't have been a TV show called Doogie Howser,
right,
about a 14-year-old doctor that's brilliant but has no manners or experience in bedside handling. And that's what this stuff is. We're all rookies at this point. We're all newbies in an orchestra, and we're all petrified. Everybody, every single person. We're afraid of making mistakes. We're afraid of not sounding our best. And at least having a list like this, it gives you some grounding of like, all right, I've got this under control. I don't have to second guess so many things. Just try to play my best.
Right, and I'll put a link to it in my in the description of the episode, but definitely check it out. It's got 29 points here, and like I said, I'd like to refer to it every couple of years or so, and just kind of make sure I'm resetting and being aware of these various things. One thing I wanted to mention too. Sorry, I'm sort of spitballing here, but when you were talking about maybe don't tap your foot there or whatever, I watched your on your YouTube channel your masterclass at the Music Academy, and you were working. You were working with John, who's a buddy of mine. That we went to music festival together, and he was doing this big like cue before he entered with his clarinet. And I love you and I have never had the chance to work together well, I auditioned for you once, but that was that was sort of the extent of our interaction with my playing. But I really appreciate how you add all these little things into your teaching, where it's not just like, okay, here's music, here's the clarinet technical stuff. It's like, hey, you don't need to give this massive cue here. They're all going to intuitively know how to do. And I think that adds to this list because, you pointing out someone, hey, don't tap your foot here, helps them kind of remember that as they're learning their craft. You know what I mean? And do you make a conscious effort to kind of add that stuff in while you're teaching?
Always. There's so many ways we can improve our clarinet playing, not by just doing scales and arpeggios or Krebs and Bach and Vademakum. There's so many little things just about our mannerisms. And as a observer of human nature, we all need to watch other people play their instruments and say, what works when the string quartet plays? How are they able to play together so well? What is it? Are they tapping their feet? How are they cueing? How are they breathing? I find string quartets breathe much better than most wind players in terms of ensemble. And those little things, when we bring those to our clarinet playing, it can be as dramatic of an improvement as just working on thirds for years.
Right. That's yeah, and that's the one of the things that I really respect about you and your teaching, and I wish I could observe more of it. Unfortunately, I'm not close enough to you to do that, geographically at least. But I love that you would add these little things in there to kind of just do this in the Mozart, but also this small little maybe physical thing that you're doing is going to help you as well, and I love that.
Well, I think that my goal, I'm gearing up here to be putting a huge amount online, and not in the normal version, but there's the internet and YouTube and streaming everything has started to pull apart our business,
Mm-hmm.
On so many levels. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but I really love to bring this element of teaching in, and they're not, I think I go and I see people post quick tips. There's no quick tips. There's no secrets, secrets to clarinet playing. No, there's no secrets. It's everyone needs to just think about what they want to sound like, and then observe what they're doing that gets in the way of it. That's and that takes time. It takes patience. It takes self-observation. All these things which our world of doom scrolling on our phone has kept us from sitting down and observing ourselves and music making in a manner that's productive.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, like, are you planning on doing like an online curriculum, or are you just planning on putting this content out there, or like what's the game plan?
I'm just putting this content out there. Ixi Chin has the Digital Clarinet Academy, and that's really growing into a whole curriculum with the Thrive programming, and that's something that's online, and I'm contributing, one month of that. But this is completely different than that. This is just putting out in a positive way a broader picture of things that we can work on as clarinet players to make us better musicians, and this list is one of them for sure.
Absolutely, and I'll look forward to seeing that whenever that comes out. I guess before we leave, Richie, is there anything else that you'd like to say, or any words of advice? I mean, you already said that you've been working on this project. Any other thing that sort of you've been inspired by in this last year? Now that you've had to sort of shift, everything's had to shift. Like, any projects that you're working on other than that? The floor is yours if you want to talk about anything.
Oh, I've got a ton of stuff coming up, and it's all bottled up and going to unfold online, but I've not been releasing it because there's just too much streaming of things that aren't they're 30-second things.
Yeah.
And that's why I just love your podcast, because you actually delve into something that's deep and a topic that is important. And I really believe everything's going to return to that very, very soon. Ask anybody whether they want to see another live stream from a living room
Right.
anytime soon, right?
Well, I remember I was talking with my buddy Ralph Sciano, who's a former student of yours as well.
Yay, Ralph!
Yeah. He's fantastic. And I actually, I think he's maybe regretting this, but before I started the podcast, I asked him if he wanted to do it with me. And he said, he had some other projects and stuff, and so he politely declined. But he said, I said to him, the world doesn't need another clarinet player playing Bach in a 1-minute video on Facebook, So
Right.
I wanted to
From the living room in front of the Christmas tree.
Yeah,
Yes.
Or in my case, from my bedroom. I felt like we needed to actually get in there and provide people with some sort of like information that they didn't have access to from people that they didn't have access to. You know what I mean?
That's
and
right.
That's my goal with the podcast and with the YouTube channel, is like, people don't have access, and I'm not saying I have full access to you, but like, people aren't they don't know you, but they want to know you. And I feel like you're willing and generous enough to share everything about you. And I feel like, having a conversation between the two of us or other people that I've talked to, that's a valuable thing for people that are looking to progress in this industry. And so that was sort of my goal with all this, was like, let's go from an angle that's not like me playing excerpts. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Because anybody
It's
can
great.
do that.
That's right. And, you bring a completely different take to this, which is much needed. So it's a beautiful thing. The other little thing that is fascinating is I have a lot of my students and people that I talk with are really worried about the future of orchestra playing, and they're spending all this time and energy wanting to be in an orchestra. Is there going to be an orchestra? What's going to happen to the world as we know it? And there's no doubt there's a big reset button that has been hit on multiple levels. But this happened in 2008. Some orchestras survived, some didn't. This is now making everyone examine what they want to do with their free time. Go to a concert, go out to dinner. What are the things that we miss? What are the things that are valuable? And so I believe that, a night out on the town is part of society that we're all going to love going back to, and the orchestras will thrive. Sadly, due to the finances of this time, there's going to be a couple of years where positions aren't going to be filled because they can get by with 1-year positions. But mark my words, Sam, mark my words, in 2 or 3 years, less than that, there will be the largest exodus of people from orchestra positions ever, the biggest amount of retirements ever. And there's going to be so many openings everywhere. And I say that because I'm in touch with a lot of friends and colleagues from Cincinnati Symphony and other orchestras and people that I play at Music Academy with. And they're all saying, wow, I've learned how to do, fill in the blank. And I can't wait to retire. And I've had to follow through with getting my real estate license. And now I've got this extra income. I'm going to play one more season. I'm going to retire.
Yep.
And so as tough as the next couple of years might be with lack of college openings or grad school openings or, not a lot of auditions because they'll do 1-year positions, at the end of the cycle, you're going to have a huge rebirth of orchestra auditions, a huge rebirth of going out and having orchestra part of nightlife. And the key to that is the demographics. The demographics, if you just look at demographics of who the symphony patron is, it's the person aged 50 to 70. Above 70, it's less and less. And below 50 is hardly at all because, I know I'm 51 next month. But up until this point, we have kids and if I have a Saturday night off, I don't want to go sit in an orchestra. Right. I want to do something, but not sit and listen to an orchestra. And that's not just because I played in it. Yeah. But I never have a night off when you have kids. But you get to a certain point. So demographics, you have Gen Xers, myself, now finally hitting the market for being able to go out, go to dinner with friend, family, significant other, and go to a concert. And so programming is going to start changing. And everything is going to get better than ever in the symphony world, I believe.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom in this industry always. Since I started learning it, they're like, oh, well, the orchestra, you never know if you're going to have a job. And it's like, well, sure, but that could be true for any job anywhere.
That's right.
And for me, man, I cannot wait to go to a restaurant again. I cannot wait to go to a movie theater. I cannot wait to go to a concert. I mean, I am chomping at the bit to do all of these things, and I think everyone is. They're all so excited about it. So I think if anything, there's going to be an explosion of live events and live music again because it was literally taken from us. It wasn't just by choice. It was taken from everybody. And so
Yes.
I totally agree with you, and I know that all my listeners will appreciate your take. And I think for all the students out there, and I'm sure you will agree, just keep working hard. There is light. There is plenty of light, and it's going to shine bright once we get through this tunnel. And yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you have?
That's it. This has been a real pleasure. I feel like I want to have a podcast and be able to invite you on it. My gosh,
Yeah.
you have so much to offer. It's just a gift to the music world for sure.
Well, who knows? Maybe I'll have room for a co-host at some point. So I'll keep you in mind.
Get Ralph. Ralph would be the best co-host for
Okay.
anything.
Sounds good. Well, Richie, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. It's really been a joy. Like I said, I've really admired you, your playing and your teaching. I love all the stuff that you have on your website. Really great resource, your YouTube channel. So thank you for spending your time with me. It's just been a real pleasure.
You bet. Everyone, check me out on Instagram or YouTube. I really don't like Facebook, though I'm sometimes on there. But go follow me, because there's going to be some really fun stuff coming up soon.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll link you in all my posts and stuff, so you guys will have direct access to Richie. But if you guys haven't had the chance already, please go to our YouTube channel and watch the new bass clarinet comparison video. While you're there,
awesome.
please. Oh, thanks, Richie. While you're there, please feel free to like, comment, and also subscribe to the channel, as I will be posting lots of new content in the coming months. Ring the bell to get alerts for when the new videos drop. Also, be sure to stop by our website at candidclarinetistpodcast.com, where you can find more information about myself, the podcast, and links to all of our content platforms. While you're there, please check out our merchandise store. And if you're watching the video, I'm wearing one of our shirts. It's very nice, very comfy. It's a great way to support the podcast, and you get something really cool in return. Once again, I am Sam Rothstein, and thanks for tuning in to the Candid Clarinetist podcast.